Welcome to A Wide Open Space. Here, our focus is strengthening our faith, cultivating ourselves, and creating lives that we love. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Nichelle Guidry Stewart. If this is your first time here, welcome to this powerful intersection of faith and personal development, this decidedly womanist space where Black women are unapologetically centered. Last week, we talked about what it means to be brought out into a wide open space, that place of love, wellness, expansion, and flourishing that God desires for each and every one of us. But today, I want to go a little bit deeper. I want to talk about what it actually takes to partner with God in creating and maintaining that place out in a wide open space. And it all starts with something that might surprise you. It all starts with getting radically honest about what you actually want and what you actually want your life to look and feel like. So today we're talking about the sacred work of naming your desires, not the desires you think you should have, not the ones that look good to other people, but the ones that make your heart expand when you imagine them becoming your reality. I learned this concept from my spiritual muse, Susan L. Taylor, in a book that low-key changed my life. It's her book called In the Spirit. And in this book, she teaches that we are not passive recipients of whatever life happens to bring to us. We are co-creators with the divine. But before we can partner with God to manifest our growth and our transformation, we have to be clear about what we are partnering for. So let's get into this episode's devotional. It comes to us from the Gospel of John, chapter 5, verse 6. It's one quick verse from a really, really beloved story. But let's take a second to ground this scripture. In John chapter 5, verse 6, Jesus encounters a man who has been lying by the pool of Bethesda for 38 years, just waiting to be healed. And here's what's so fascinating. Jesus does not immediately heal him. Instead, Jesus asks him a question. Do you want to be healed? Now, friends, there is audacity in that question. After 38 years of waiting, why would Jesus ask such a thing? Wouldn't the answer be somewhat obvious? But here is something that I've learned. Sometimes we get so comfortable in our suffering, so used to our own limitations, whether they are self-imposed or imposed by our culture or our communities, that we don't even know if we want to be whole anymore. Sometimes we, as Black women, have become so conditioned to, quote, bearing our cross and being grateful for whatever scraps we're given that we lose touch with our deepest desires. Back to the scripture. Notice the man's response to Jesus. He does not say yes. He explains, rather, why he can't be healed. I have no one to help me into the pool, he says. How often do we respond to God's invitations with our limitations instead of, yes, Lord, that is what I want. That is really what I desire. But here's the really beautiful and powerful part of this story. That Jesus is requiring this man to move past his religious passivity and his spiritual bypassing into partnership. The question, do you want to be healed, is not for God's information. God already knew that. That rather was for this man's transformation. He had to name what he wanted before the miracle could be performed. And so I want to meditate together a little bit on desire as sacred. And I want you to hold on to your seat because I don't know if you've heard this before. In fact, this might be a challenge to some ideas that you have inherited or that you believe. There is something very revolutionary about this. We have been taught, especially as Black women, that our desires are dangerous, selfish, and somehow unholy. We've been told to want less, expect less, settle for less. But what if I told you that your deepest desires, the ones that align with love, healing, and your authentic purposes, are actually God speaking through you? And I want to be clear about what I mean when I say desire. I'm not talking about your vices. I'm not talking about your proclivities and your addictions even. I'm talking about those prayers of your heart, those desires of your heart that align with the vision you have for yourself, that align with the life that you have imagined for yourself, that align with the gifts that you have been given to impact this world. I am literally talking about those desires that call you into your healing, that call you into your highest, best, and most authentic self, the self that is walking in sync and in rhythm and in synchronicity with God. Those are the desires I'm talking about. Jesus talks about these desires in Matthew 6. He reminds us that God already knows what we need before we ask. So why does God even require us to ask? Because the asking isn't for God's information. The asking, the naming, is for our transformation. When we name what we want, we're taking the first step in partnering with God to create it, to manifest it, to bring it into being. Let me see if I can illustrate. Your desire for a loving partnership that actually nourishes your soul. That is a sacred desire. Your desire for work that feels purposeful instead of just a paycheck. That is a sacred desire. Your dream of healing from the trauma that has been weighing you down for years. That is a sacred desire. Your vision, even for financial freedom, creative expression, authentic community, and sisterhood, all of this is sacred when it comes from a place of love and alignment with God, who created you for all of these things and has created all of these things for you. Susan L. Taylor teaches us that we are co-creators with God. But before we can co-create anything, we have to admit what we are trying to create. We have to demystify what we really want. And sisters, this is where I want to share something really deeply personal with you. Because the most foundational moment in my adult life of partnering with God came when I had to admit something that was hard to admit and took me many years to admit. And this was about a decade and some change ago at this point, but I had to get really honest, once again, radically honest with myself and with God and also with my community, that the marriage I was in wasn't fulfilling and that I wanted something different. Now, almost a full decade has passed since this divorce experience. And in that time, I've had a lot of opportunity and it has taken me a lot of resources, time, therapy, coaching, and prayer to come to a new story about that experience. And I've had to reclaim a lot of the blame that I placed on my former spouse for what was happening in the marriage and finally accept and admit that what was really happening was I just wasn't ready and it wasn't what I wanted. And in getting honest about that, yes, it was a painful process. Yes, it was not something that I would wish on my enemies, but it was a process that, really thrust me out into a wide open space. And it initiated this era of really intentionally curating and creating and partnering with God to create this life that is meaningful, that is purposeful, that is enjoyable, and where I feel that I have the grounding and the tools to keep on creating a life that I don't really want to run away from, but I want to continue to hone and to grow deeper into. So, all of that being said, let me get back to my notes. So, for many years, I tried to convince myself that wanting more was me being ungrateful for this good man with a stable job and a good life that we were building together. I had a husband. We lived in the South Loop of Chicago, and it really was what stability looks like. And a lot of people would say to me, you should be grateful that you have a man. I mean, in this partner and man economy, people was really struggling, and I know that they still are. But, again, this idea of being grateful for not the scraps, because he wasn't the scraps, but being grateful for something that doesn't quite hit your personal mark was an idea that was repeatedly reiterated to me. Also people would also say things like, well, marriage is hard work and you just need to keep at it. You just need to keep going. And yes, marriage is hard work. But there's a difference, y'all, between working on a marriage and dying in one. There is a difference between growing together and slowly suffocating apart and away from each other. So the sacred work for me was admitting, again, first to myself and then to God and then to my community, that I wanted a partnership that felt like partnership. I wanted love that felt like love. I wanted to wake up next to someone who actually saw me and who celebrated me and who wanted to build something beautiful together instead of just existing in the same space. Making that admission felt dangerous because it meant that I might have to leave what was familiar, leave what was comfortable to make space for what was possible. But sisters, that is exactly, going back to the scripture, what the man at the pool had to do that day. After 38 years of lying in the same spot, he had to get up and walk into his healing. So when I finally named my desire for authentic love and not just marriage for the sake of marriage, but genuine partnership, and when I finally also admitted that for me to obtain that, I really needed a season of being a single woman. I needed some years of learning myself and learning my voice, of learning to love my own company. I needed some years of dating just for fun and traveling by myself and really honing in on, in the words of the great Howard Thurman, the sound of my own genuine. I wanted to create a life that I loved that was not dependent upon a partner. And I knew that if I was ultimately going to get to a partnership that felt like something I wanted and not like something I needed, I knew that I also needed and deeply desired to have that kind of relationship with myself. And so getting to that partnership necessitated I needed a season of singleness that felt good and felt right and felt joyous to me and could ultimately put me in a place where a loving partnership was just the cherry on top of an already wonderful and sweet life. And so I had to admit all of that to myself. And in naming those desires and coming face to face with, okay, these are the changes that I want to make, and these are some of the sacrifices that they are going to require, that is when I really feel like I connected with God as my partner, as my co-conspirator, and as my co-creator. And really, y'all, that is when God really started to work with me. But again, it required me to partner with God by doing my own work, by going to therapy, saying my prayers, getting really clear about my own patterns and my own ways of thinking and being that could make it potentially difficult for someone to really partner with me. And most importantly, learning to love myself enough to stop accepting crumbs from anyone. And let me tell you, leaving that marriage was one of the hardest things I ever did. But it was also the most sacred act of self-love I have ever performed, because I wasn't just leaving something. I was making space for God to bring me out into a wide open space of authentic love, love of self, and maybe love of another. As the great Audre Lorde reminds us, our feelings are our most genuine path to knowledge. Your desires, when they come from your authentic self, are not distractions from your spiritual life. They are invitations into deeper partnership with the divine. So I want to move us and conclude with your wide open space exercise, and it's called the Desire Inventory. Here's what I want you to do this week, my sisters. I'm giving you a very simple but powerful exercise that can help you get, in the words of James Clear, 1% better at partnering with God and with your highest and most authentic self. I call it the Desire Inventory. Take out a journal or a piece of paper, and I want you to write down the header, what I actually want. Not what you think you should want, not what looks good to other people from the outside looking in, but what makes your heart sing when you imagine it. Start each sentence with, I desire, and let yourself write freely. I desire a career that feels like a calling. I desire a home that feels like a sanctuary. I desire relationships that feed my soul. I desire financial freedom. I desire healing from this pain that I have been carrying. I desire to feel beautiful in my own skin. I desire more expansive experiences. Don't edit yourself. Don't worry about how you're going to make these things happen. Just practice the sacred act of naming what you want. And after you have named your desires, this is what I want you to do next. I want you to pick one, just one thing from your list, and ask yourself this question. God, how can I partner with you to create this reality? Then I just want you to take some time to listen. Pay attention to what comes up. It might be an action step. It may be a person that you need to call. It may be a boundary that you need to set. It might be a conversation that you need to have. The point is not to have all of the answers right now. The point is simply to start the conversation between you and God about what it is that you want to create together. Sisters, remember this. Your desires, to use the words of Jesus, the desires of your heart matter to God because you matter to God. The fact that you want something beautiful for your life is not selfish. It is sacred. You are not here to settle for scraps. You are here to partner with the divine in creating a life that reflects the love, the beauty, and the abundance that God has just for you. Next week, we'll be talking about what it means to take the next step after you have named your desires. How to begin moving in faith, even when you can't see the whole path. Until then, do your desire inventory. Practice the sacred act of naming your desires. And remember, you are loved, you are powerful, and you are not alone in this work. Thank you for joining me in this wide open space. If this episode blessed you, please share it with the sister who needs it. Subscribe, rate, and review to help other listeners find us. And as you go, may you walk boldly in your calling and flourish in the wide open space God has prepared just for you. Be blessed, be bold, and be beautifully you.